Hey YouTube, hey everybody, thanks to all my new subscribers, thanks to everybody following along, watching the videos, leaving likes, comments, all that really helps out, so thanks a lot. I'm making this video today in regards to the newest series of videos on my channel. One of them's already out and another's coming out today. It's on a series of podcasts I'm doing with my buddies on the political mantra that I wrote a few years back. And so I think it'll be relevant, I think it'll be interesting, and this video is about sort of an unspoken aspect of that I think is important. You know, the mantra is sort of a list of points to remember and to think about and to help orient us. But that's all necessarily somewhat intellectual because it's written down. And I wanted to talk about more of the emotional aspect or an emotional aspect of that I think is important. And so this video is going to be about emotional control. And I'm hoping to tell some stories about that because there's a lot of times that emotional control comes up and a lot of different situations that it can come in. It can be in the political arena for sure, as I think most of us know. But I think there's commonalities through all of them that I want to draw out. And these are going to be some ideas about a certain level of detachment, which is something people don't necessarily think of as a good thing, but I think it can be, and I'll try to make that case. And just a baseline of grit, which I think is necessary. And, you know, this is implied and this comes out in the mantra later in the middle where we start talking about things like resilience is more valuable than fragility. That's something that is going to be uncomfortable for some people to hear. So you're going to have discomfort and emotion coming up. And for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable to say, or to say, hey, I actually kind of agree with that, because you know other people are going to be uncomfortable with it, and their uncomfortableness makes us uncomfortable. So I wanted to tell several stories, hopefully fairly quickly, about emotional control and how it's played a part in my life. And as you see, I'll start out, and I'm not the pinnacle of emotional control or anything like that, but just some reflections on how it all sort of connects and how we can see it at work, and maybe some ways to develop that a little bit. Well, the first one, starting chronologically, when I was quite young, this one's a little bit silly and embarrassing. I mean, to be fair, I was 6, but you still look back on it, you're like, ugh. I was 6, and it was my first year that I was allowed to snowboard by my parents. So I was, having fun, having a good time until I got stuck on a flat track. And for those of you who don't know, if you lose your momentum and you've got your feet strapped into the board, and the board's pretty heavy, especially compared to a 6-year-old. You've got to lug that thing, maybe even undo your bindings, which gets annoying, and carry the board, whatever it is. Anyhow, I decided to just sort of kind of hop, which is actually kind of the most energy intensive, difficult way to do it. And I had to hop my way to the next downhill, which was a good stretch away and over a little bit of a hump. Well, that was extremely uncomfortable. It was difficult. I didn't like it one little bit, and I actually threw a little tantrum. And frankly, I had a conversation with God and basically said, if you don't help me through this, by which I meant make this difficulty go away and just make it all easy and all downhill for me, I won't talk to you again. And honestly, I don't know for sure, but that may be like a significant break in my relationship that I had with God, and what moved me through my started moving me and then played out through my adolescence towards agnosticism and atheism and whatnot. Really silly way to go down that path, but that honestly might have been the catalyst. I was just terribly uncomfortable, hated every moment of what was going on, and it seemed to me like God should step in and help me out. I clearly didn't like it, and why wouldn't God make it easy and downhill? So anyhow, after many years and a little bit of maturing, another situation when I was I don't know exactly how old I was, 20 some. I was scuba diving, and the party I was with ended up going unadvisedly swimming against a current, up current. And it was really exhausting, really hard. A lot of people we were with were beginners, and I was a little bit more experienced, but I was having a really hard time. But I was maintaining this immense control over my breath, just like perfectly, overly slow breathing, really paradoxically trying to push against it and keep my control. But I needed a break, and I finally got shelter behind this rock and grabbed onto it and let the current pass over, and I gave myself permission. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take some deep breaths and recover a bit. And as soon as I let go of that control, I couldn't get it back. I was so out of breath, and I needed to breathe. And this was sketchy. And I looked at my air gauge and just saw it dropping like ridiculously quickly because I was just gasping air. And I started to freak out. And I had been trained to deal with people who were panicking, but I had never legitimately seen panic nor experienced it myself. And in that moment, I felt just the edge, like the tipping point of panic. I could see where it was going to go, if I just went a little bit further. And that freaked me out more. And all I wanted in the world was to get to the surface and just breathe open air freely. And I had this strong desire just to swim to the surface and breathe and catch my breath. And then the rational part of my brain was like, no, you can't do that. That is not good. You cannot ascend rapidly. But in that moment, hearing no was not what my emotional self wanted to hear. And it made me freak out more and had that tinge of panic to it. And I had basically had a conversation with myself. And this is where a certain level of detachment actually becomes necessary, beneficial. I said, look, here's what's happening. Literally talking to myself. You're committing right now to staying underwater. You cannot go to the surface. What we're doing is we're going to stay here, and either we catch our breath or we pass out. And if we pass out, you're going to just commit yourself to trust that someone in your party is going to save you. That was pretty intense, but that was the commitment I had to make. And I just said, this is the way we're doing it, and I recovered my breath and got through it. So, that's an example of successful and really intense emotional control. There are a lot of, there's a lot of spectrum in between that. For a long time, I'm sitting here just on the edge of this canyon, and for quite a long time, I've been pretty terrified of cliff edges. This one's a little bit not so bad because there's more of a slope to the edge. But at one point in my life, this would be pretty darn terrifying to me. But I'm sitting over here and feeling fine. I had a more intense experience this summer where, I played with that edge a little bit. And I got other places where I'll expand on that sort of approach to fear. I'm not saying you have to always challenge your fear and you can never do anything but overcome your fear. I actually think that's an unhelpful maxim. It's helpful in many cases, but it's not universally applicable. Anyhow, the point being, these all came up because I had this trip recently, just this weekend. We went to the sand dunes, and they reminded me of a previous experience I had where I went to these sand dunes with my wife, and this was my first time planning it on my own. I'd been there with groups before, and we'd always been there on a cloudy day. I never realized that. I never realized that there was a reason for that until afterwards when I was looking back at it. But I found out that day, the reason why it was always cloudy when we went. And that was because the sand gets super hot in late summer in the full sun. So it was scalding hot. By the way, this is a 400 foot, roughly, maybe 450 foot sand dune. If anyone's climbed up a moderately sized sand dune before, you know how hard it is. Well, climbing to the top of a 400 foot one is many times more hard. And at the top, really the last 10 feet, the only way to do it is you go bear crawl all fours and get your way up to that peak. It's really uncomfortable, really intense. Well, makes it so much worse when the sand's scalding hot, which it was by the time we got to the top of the dune. So instead of hiking it barefoot like we normally would, we kept our shoes on, which helped a little bit, but the sand was still, it was hand sandals, so sand was still getting in. And you'd have to bury our feet and find some cooler sand for a little bit while we let the heat pass and then trudge on again. Well, so that experience was not fun, not comfortable. But we went through it, and I still chose to make it more difficult. When you get along the dune to a certain, there's like a secondary peak that's sort of the highest part with the longest side of the dune. And I really enjoy running down that. It's almost like flying or jumping on the moon or something. You're just coasting down with gravity and the landing soft and whatnot. So I go take off my shoes, go sprinting down the dune, running, tumbling, having a good time, laughing maniacally, as I normally do. And then I got to the bottom. And at the bottom, I had this choice of, well, I can go back a little ways and up a shorter side and then climb back to where my wife is. But I don't have my shoes, so the longer way, it's so hot, is going to be uncomfortable. So maybe I'll just go straight back up the really steep, long way that I came. Technically, it's shorter than going around, but it's still long and steep. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to climb right back up the dunes to get back to my shoes in the shortest distance possible. Well, about a fourth of the way up, I really started to regret that decision. And it really started to hone in this thing that I'd read about and sort of understood, but I understood it in this moment. This is from Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I believe it was in that book, he said that sensations feel eternal. When you have a sensation in your body and you notice it, it doesn't contain time. It just whatever you're feeling feels like it's going to go on forever. And I noticed that saying, and that kind of makes sense, but I didn't know if it was true or not. And in that moment, I knew it was true. When I was climbing up this dune, and not only was the sand scalding hot, so my hands and feet were in pain because I was going on all fours the whole way because it was steep, but I was in, let's say, mild respiratory distress and very uncomfortable in terms of just being exhausted. I also have exercise-induced asthma, by the way, so plays a factor in there. Anyhow, so I am not comfortable, exhausted, but can't stop because the sand is too hot. And so I just have this feeling of just super uncomfortability. I hate this and I don't want it. I don't want to do this. Why the heck did I do this? And I start not just regretting my decision to run down and then climb back up the same way, but questioning that decision and questioning just life in general. Just like, why is there pain in life? I'm sure some of you have been through this, where distress makes you just sort of expand. And what is life? Why is there this horrible side of life, of all this difficulty? And so, yeah, I was going through that. And I felt a deep kinship with the characters of Dune, of their just infinite sea of desert, and the real life people who live in the desert and travel through the hot desert and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, what a terrible experience. And these lives that are so much more difficult than mine, where I have this short experience, but they live this way. Oh my gosh, how horrible is that? And I recognized this moment, and I knew I had sort of a decision tree. I could continue up this hill and continue complaining, whining to myself, or I could not choose that path. And I had learned through cross country, for one, running cross country in high school, that you can go the same distance and it can be a completely different experience. If you whine the whole way, it sucks the whole way. If you have a different outlook, it is not so bad. So I made the decision, and I switched from saying, what a terrible experience, to saying, well, you know what? I'm grateful that I have the ability, the physical ability to actually get through this. And that even though right now this is terrible, it's not going to be that long before I'm not on a dune anymore. And I'm actually not in the universe of Dune, the infinite sea of horrendous desert. And I have a home to go to and don't live in a barren desert, and there's water that I can have soon. So I just started listing the things I was grateful for. And I think at the time I actually laughed about the juxtaposition between, because I still remembered that story about myself as a young snowboarder, and sort of laughed at how childish I was then, and I was like, okay, I'm actually grateful for the fact that I have this emotional control and maturity now. And so I made that choice in that moment and finished the rest of the climb, and it was uncomfortable, but I got through it, and it ended. It felt eternal while I was going through it, but it wasn't eternal, and I got through it. Well, so what I hope these various stories illustrate is these elements of detachment, as I said, and grit. When you're halfway up a scalding hot dune, there's no easy way out. There's just not. And you can complain about it. You can make it worse, or you can make it better. And I think this applies just as much to our political conflict. When we're in moments where we hate it, we hate what's going on, we want it to stop, the easy way out is to let your emotions control you. Let your emotions make your decisions for you. But that is not the way that leads to less difficulty. It actually leads to more difficulty and more discomfort. So there's just this level of grit where resilience and the ability to have emotional control is just more valuable for yourself, for your long-term experience, and for society around you than fragility and for tantrum throwing and for allowing your emotions to control you. And some brands of our modern movements, some valence of emotional intelligence, I'm not saying all of it, there's a lot of different ways people interpret that and apply it, but definitely some brand of it pushes, just be authentic and let your emotions guide you and essentially let your emotions control you. Well, that's just not true. You need emotional control. Emotional control helps you, and it helps everyone around you. You need to be able to have an uncomfortable discussion and moderate it and not allow it to just get worse because you're angry. Because if it just gets worse because you're angry, then it's not getting better, and your anger is making it worse, by definition. If we want to get through our political conflict, our borderline civil war, we're gonna have to control our emotions, right? And we can say that all we want, but it takes more than just intellectual posturing. It takes more than just saying it. It takes a level of grit. It takes a level of detachment where you can look at yourself and you can say, I recognize right now that I'm angry, I don't like what's going on, and I'd rather not be here, and I'm really tempted to whine about it, to blame someone else, to attack someone else, whatever it is. But I'm going to tell myself, frankly, just to shut up, to deal with it, to be a controlled grown-up, and make the situation better, or make every effort to make the situation better as you can. And then if it doesn't get better, then that's out of your hands. You did your best, but you didn't make it worse, right? And so there's grit and there's detachment, where you don't view your any segment of yourself as your entire self. You have the ability to stand back from your emotional self, your physical self, whatever it may be in the moment that's wanting, sounding an alarm and wanting to drive you in a certain way, and say, hold on, that's not actually the way we want to go. So with all that, a longer video than normal, but thanks for those who listen and follow to the end. Stay tuned for the political mantra videos. Check those out. Keep these things in mind, and let's as my first video from it is, let's rescue our societal cohesion. It's going to take some grit, some sacrifice, some real uncomfortability, difficulty. The second point of the political mantra is life is difficult, so we just got to face it and get control of ourselves. So hopefully this is helpful. Check out other videos on the channel. Always like, subscribe, leave a comment, share it. It really helps out the channel. I really appreciate it. So thanks everybody. God bless.